Welcome to Your Vote Counts, a candidate forum sponsored by Capital Community TV and the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties. My name is Vernadine Anderson, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization that works to educate ourselves and the public about government issues. In this program, we will present the candidates for the Legislative House District 19. They are alphabetically Jody Hack and Larry Trott. Our format for this forum is as follows. Each candidate has 3 minutes to give an opening statement outlining their background, qualifications, and top 3 priorities if elected. Following that, each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer questions that have been prepared by League members on current issues. The candidates were not given the questions ahead of time. At the end, the candidates will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement in which to state the legacy they would like to leave if elected to that office. Prior to this, we drew for seating. Question order will rotate, so we will begin with Ms. Hack as candidate A for her opening remarks. Ms. Hack.
Thank you. Hi, I'm State Representative Jody Hack, and I represent House District 19, which is South Salem, Almsville, and Turner, and I'm running for re-election. And I'd just like to say thank you to the League of Women Voters and CCTV for having us today. I am a mother of 2 and have been married for 27 years. I'm a 3rd-generation Oregonian, a business owner, and have been involved in education and nonprofit work for many years. I currently have served on the House Transportation Committee, the Natural Resources Ways and Means Committee for the legislature. The Education Committee was appointed to the Special Committee on Small Business Development and Growth, the Department of Energy Oversight, and various other task forces relating to educational issues. When I first ran, the first time I ran on the motto that failure was not an option. And after serving 2 years in the legislature, I feel that now more than ever. I've said it before and I'll continue to say it, that a strong Oregon starts with educated children. And we've got to stay the course on early learning, career and technical education, and making sure that students are ready to enter college and career. I also believe that agriculture is a huge asset to the state, with over 80% of our agricultural products being exported out of our state, bringing in new revenues. I am currently working on a bipartisan piece of legislation that would help to impact our sustainable industries by increasing research and development and by providing opportunities for economic expansion. Small business will always be a priority to me, with over 80% of our employers being from small businesses. Like I said, I serve on the Small Business Growth Committee, and at first I was optimistic about that committee and its work, but I really feel as though we will have some terrific legislation that comes out to support small business development and growth. Transportation is always of importance, and transportation is vital to our economic stability in our state. We've got to do a better job of transporting goods and services across our state. I could go on. It looks like we're running out of time, but those are some of my priorities and some of my qualifications for running for House District 19. Again, I'm Jody Hack, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Mr. Trott, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you. Yeah, as noted, I'm Larry Trott, and I'm also running for State Representative in House District 19. And I too want to thank CCTV and the League of Women Voters for having us here today. I have lived in Salem for the past almost 20 years. My son is approaching graduation from the University of Oregon here shortly. I've lived in the Salem area for almost 20 years. And prior to that, I got my undergraduate degree from the University of Davis, along with my law degree from the University of California, Davis. I also served 20 years in the Navy as a naval officer. I retired as a lieutenant commander. In 2003, I served as the governor's statewide food drive coordinator, and I was also marketing chair for the Marion Polk Food Share capital campaign. In addition, for the past 10 years, I have been on the board of directors for the Willamette Education Service District Board, which represents and supports 21 school districts in Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties. I think based on my background, it's kind of easy to see the kind of issues that I'm concerned about. As a veteran, I'm concerned about veterans issues. My time working with the Marion Polk Food Share and as a statewide food drive coordinator have made me keenly aware of the issues involving hunger in our community. And also, with my time on the Willamette Education Service District, I think that's an indication of my commitment to bettering public education in this community and throughout Oregon. If the issues I've been talking about were being adequately addressed, I probably wouldn't be running for office, but unfortunately, that's not the case. In the last few years, Oregon was like had the fourth lowest high school graduation rate in the country. And we're also one of the most food insecure states in the country, and it's getting worse. We're also trying to fund veteran services with questionable gambling dollars rather than a more appropriate source. In order to deal with these issues, there are 3 areas that I would like to focus on. One would be to empower local governments and school boards to deal better with many of these issues, such as transportation, economic development, and education at the local level. I think we can do that by removing unnecessary mandates that act as barriers to self-determination and local control. 2, I think we must generate revenue and be good stewards of state funds in order to help hire more teachers, improve our transportation infrastructure, and the like. This also means being ethically transparent and financially responsible. No more cover Oregons. 3, progressively and responsibly eliminate video lottery and the enormous social and financial damage it does to our state by causing more crime, poverty, homelessness, and family breakup. Based on my background and my proven commitment to help solve some of the difficult challenges facing our community, I believe that I can be an effective voice in the legislature to represent the people of this district and of Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to read the question, and unless you need it repeated, we'll just hear it once.
Okay.
As we are rotating, we will, and Ms. Hack began, we are going to start with Mr. Trott for question 1. In recent years, the legislature has dedicated more funding for early childhood as well as higher education. Yet Oregon continues to have many low-performing schools, one of the shortest school years in the nation, and 4th worst dropout rate. What legislation would you support to address these issues?
Well, having been on the Willamette Education Service District Board for a decade, I am keenly aware of the issues involving education, particularly early childhood learners, which we do. The mission of the WSD is to support children and families, particularly children with special needs and early childhood education. So I think it's important that we have more funds and more focus on early childhood education, particularly when you see what happens when you look at 3rd grade reading scores. Those are oftentimes an indicator of the child's success throughout their life, and I think you need to target at that level. Also, high school graduation rates as well. I think those are abominable, and we've got to do better there. One of the basic issues for that, and people have asked me in different forums to say, how are we going to address the issues of education, particularly large classroom sizes and things like that? And it really comes down oftentimes to just money. We've got to get more revenue to the schools, and we have to empower those people that have the skills and the talents. I used to work closely with Salem Kaiser Education. I still do, but Salam Noor, who's one of the who used to work at Salem Kaiser, we were privileged to have him there, is now working for the state. And those people and the folks like Dave Novotny, Christy Perry, and the like that work in the education community have a lot of good answers. It's just that we need to empower them and fund them to get to that point.
Thank you. Ms. Hack, question 1.
Thank you. Like I've said before, we've got to stay the course on early childhood education. And the legislature has made some great movements in that. I was fortunate enough to be appointed to the Fellowship on Early Learning, and we are working on putting back together on a bipartisan way the Early Learning Caucus that we haven't had for many years. One of the things that we did do in the legislature that I believe that we can expand on is the Pre-K Promise, which is to work with preschools across our state and connect them with our school districts, and to make sure that every child enters kindergarten ready to learn. That is critical. In addition to that, every child obviously needs to have the resources and the abilities to read by the 3rd grade. As it relates to our dropout rate, I believe that it's going to be really difficult for us to move the dial on our graduation rates and lower the number of dropouts until we bring counselors back into schools, possibly some social workers. I'm working on a piece of legislation right now, as a matter of fact, just met with Lindsay Capps and some other folks to possibly increase the number of counselors and social workers in schools. We've got to engage families, we've got to engage students, we have to provide professional development for teachers. Teachers need to love to teach and students need to love to learn. We passed legislation as it relates to assessments and over-testing, and we've got more work to do there, and I look forward to having the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Question 2. Some feel that partisan gridlock is interfering with the ability to achieve legislation that benefits the people of Oregon. Do you believe that that perception is justified? What, if anything, can you do to change that perception? The question goes to you.
You know, having just served my first full term in the legislature, I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised that really there are many, many issues that are not partisan. Obviously, there are some of the social issues and some things that can be controversial, and yes, you do have some gridlock. Transportation was one of those that really shouldn't have been a partisan issue but turned into one. Outside of that, though, I can honestly say that I built some amazing relationships with folks across the aisle, passed some legislation, co-chief sponsored some ethics laws, and Speaker Kotek and I did a bill on African American students and increasing their graduation rates and stopping some of the dropout there. So while I know it exists, I'm going to be real. I mean, there are times that it does happen. But I do think that more times than not, we are able to come together and work to better Oregon and work together for its citizens on majority of all issues. And if you look at our voting records, you can see there are many, many times that all of us vote yes on a lot of the legislation. But there are times that it can be controversial as well.
Thank you. Mr. Trott, question 2.
Yeah, I would say that perception becomes reality after a while, and you see it in the media, and when I'm out knocking on doors and talking to people, you hear it from them too. And they understand that you need government, and they understand that government has a job to do. But both on the national level and the state level, a lot of people perceive that there's a lot of partisan gridlock out there. And on certain issues, it's like people will go into certain corners. If it's on taxes, there'll be no new taxes kind of positions from one side, or doing no new business things on another side. And while I applaud the fact that there's collegiality to some degree in the state legislature, that perception's not getting out into the public. And there may be a lot of agreement on different bills and whatnot that come through, or on different issues that come through, but there's some real core issues out there that we really need to get a handle on, the state and the legislature. And that's a lot of times in terms of trying to provide more revenue to the state and to the communities that are trying to deal with a lot of the problems we talk about. You know, different forums that I've been at, they say, what are you going to do about education? What are you going to do about lack of teachers? What do you do about transportation infrastructure? All of those require money, and those are where the heavy lifting has got to be done, and that's where we got to break down those walls and make that happen.
Thank you. Question 3. How do you view the current state of foster care in Oregon, and what should the newly appointed director role be? Mr. Trott, we'll start with you.
Well, what has come out in that regard has been really an embarrassment and almost criminal in nature. You cannot have children, and these were children we're talking about, and putting them into institutions or into homes where you've got folks that there's very little oversight, that you've got people working caseloads that are just overwhelmed. And I'm really going to come down to it right now. What was really appalling to me was the response that came from the various agencies involved regarding what was happening at these locations. They had knowledge of things and were acting on them. I said earlier about the state needing to be ethically and financially responsible, but we need to be transparent about some things, and we need to be open with the public, and especially when it concerns the safety of the state's children. I've been involved in state government for a number of years, and I've seen situations where the press want information about a certain topic, and there's this delay, deny kind of mentality that happens in state government, and that's got to stop. And I think the legislature really has to come down hard on various agencies to make sure that things like the foster care issues and other ones don't keep popping up.
Thank you. Ms. Hack, question 3.
Thank you. I think the director first and foremost has to hold folks accountable. And at the end of the day, the buck stops there. And they've got to be the watchdog of the system. And they can't step back when there is an issue and say, I didn't know. They have a responsibility to our children and to our state to know what's going on. And I currently have a piece of legislation that I am working on that was brought to my attention by a constituent that, as things are unfolding coming out of DHS, one of the issues is, well, what do we do with children who can't be placed, who have developmental disabilities and things? They are literally housing children in hotel rooms. We had over 30 kids on a waiting list at that point. They were expending $11,000 a month on one child with no treatment, basically babysitting, holding them in a hotel room because there was nowhere for them to go. They've got to do a better job of recruiting and retaining quality foster parents. And part of that also goes back to the reimbursement piece. We've got to take a look and dig deep into what is it that we're reimbursing? How much are we investing in our foster children? Are they able to adequately care for them and provide for their needs? So all of those things combined with the accountability piece, and again, I truly believe that it goes back, it starts at the top. And that has to be an entire culture change within that organization. So I'm looking forward to see what the committee that's been dealing with that brings forward in legislation and otherwise. So.
Thank you. For question 4, the legislature has responsibility for a transportation package. How should this be developed, and what elements should be included? This question is for you, Ms. Hack.
Thank you. Transportation, yes, is a hot topic, and I said it earlier, and I continue to say Oregon's economic vitality depends on a transportation package. Right now, the wholesalers are paying 30 cents at the pump before we ever get it. With the low carbon fuel standards that came out, not improving any of our roads, and no proven fact that it reduces the carbon, ended up at least 19 cents, could be up to $1 for taxpayers, again, with no improvements to roads, bridges, or our infrastructure. We've got to deal with the issue at the port, even though our governor believes that happened before her time and is not on her watch. It is an issue. We've got to take a look at the port. We need to take a look at the Coos Bay port. There's an untapped resource in Coos Bay that we have not utilized. But we had a deal on the table. Transportation package came up, dealing with gridlock through Portland, all of those issues, and it was going to be about 4 cents a gallon, and it blew up. And again, you mentioned the partisan issues. I think that did come into play, and that's an unfortunate thing. But I look forward to it being back on the table, and we definitely have a responsibility to all Oregonians. Doesn't matter if you're in the Portland area, Salem, or Eastern Oregon. We have transportation issues across the state. So those have to be addressed. And exactly what that's going to look like, we'll have to see how that plays out.
Thank you. Mr. Trott, question 4.
Yeah, thank you. Transportation's a huge issue. Again, I've heard it at many forums, most recently at the League of Oregon Cities, when the different mayors of various communities that were there talking about the difficulties they have with their transportation infrastructure and the support that they need. There's a lot of unfinished projects out there that haven't been funded. And and it is vital to our economic situation is to make sure that we have a good transportation system. One of the things that we've talked about, of course, was funding, but also trying to get some alternatives out there to, all the traveling by road, whether it's internally on us in the city or on the highways, infrastructure for public transportation, particularly in cities like Portland, I think are key, and they need to expand there. We also talked, though, about the fact that when you drive up into Portland, and anybody who's done that oftentimes find themselves in a parking lot, and it makes you not want to go. But if we can move some of our transportation, especially truck traffic, onto railroads and whatnot, where it travels cheaper, it does less impact on the roads, and helps remove gridlock, I think we can incentivize to help make something like that happen. and which I think would be a benefit for virtually everyone involved. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Question 5 for our candidates. Do you think the balance between individual and corporate taxes is appropriate? Please relate this to your vision of an ideal Oregon tax structure. Mr. Trott, would you begin?
Well, that's such a simple question right there. An ideal Oregon tax structure. I don't know if there is an ideal tax structure out there. I think a tax structure is going to have to be tailored to the individual communities or states that we're talking about. I do think I have been a proponent of ballot measure 97. I think that is a fair corporate tax. I think it strikes a good balance. I think a lot of the folks that I've talked to in my time canvassing and whatnot feel the same way. Their take on it is they just don't want to give it to a legislator that's irresponsible and they can't trust with spending. And after you saw stuff like what happened with the Cover Oregon and what you saw happen with the Columbia River crossing, where we kept going with something that can't take place without the state of Washington being a participant. I think 90 legislators sort of stood up at one time and said, no, we're not going to do this. But I think Measure 97 is one of those things that can get us to a point where we can generate the kind of revenue we need for the systems that need improving. And I think if we do that, I think it'll strike a good balance for the folks of Oregon and give us the kind of revenue we need to have an effective education system, transportation systems, and a healthy state for everybody.
Thank you. Ms. Hack.
Thank you. I think, it's tough to say. Corporations, yes, should pay their fair share. Are they paying their fair share? I don't know. They'll tell you they are. Some folks say that they aren't. I think that one of the things that we've got to be really careful about and very thoughtful when you look at a tax structure is those that are creating the jobs, how long and how hard can you continue to hit them and expect that they're going to continue to create jobs? So when you look at Measure 97, and we know that it's going to cost you and I and corporations more money. Corporations aren't going to absolve that. They're going to pass it on to the consumer. It's a tax that it's the highest in history. And I'm not saying that we don't have some reform that needs to be done, but I don't think that this is the answer. When you have a product that's being manufactured and they're paying 2.5%, then you have the next guy that actually packages it, they're paying 2.5. The next guy that ships it, they're paying 2.5, and then the entity that sells the product is paying 2.5. By the time it reaches the consumer, you're talking a 10% increase. I'm deeply concerned about those folks that are on fixed incomes and are on retirement. They don't get a 10% increase in their wages. So how that's going to be absorbed, I don't believe that that's the answer to the tax problems. So I have very, 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 grave concerns about Measure 97 and the corporate tax.
Thank you both. We're going to take one more question, but we're going to take it with a minute answer, considering our time remaining. And this question will go to you for a minute. If elected, what steps would you take to improve the security of Oregon residents in the event of either a natural disaster or a terrorist event?
Well, I think that, and I've been an advocate for more police for a long time. I think we've got a responsibility to increase those numbers the best that we can. I think in addition to that, we need to have emergency plans that are in place, dealing with cities and school districts and things. Those oftentimes are left outdated and aren't brought to the forefront. I think that we've got to take the time to look at those and to work with our local communities and the state in partnership on how we would react to those incidents and make sure that we are adequately prepared and can protect our citizens.
Thank you. Same question to you, Mr. Trott.
So it's interesting, I was just meeting with a supporter of my campaign who specializes in disaster preparedness and works closely with search and rescue teams throughout the state of Oregon, but mostly in the Marion Polk area. And one of his points, and this is a very good nonpartisan issue right here, that we need to be more prepared. And we talk about things like the upcoming earthquakes, and we talk about retrofitting schools to be prepared for that. We talk about having a tsunami alert system on the coast, and I believe in all of those things. But what they do in that regard is they go out oftentimes on a volunteer basis to make sure that people are prepared door to door to understand what to do in the case of an emergency. And also they support the search and rescue teams that, let's face it, in a major disaster would be something that would need to be done. So I think we need to look into funding more of that. I know when I was in the Navy, that one of the mottos was eternal vigilance is the price of safety. And I think that's what we need to do. We just need to be eternally vigilant and put the funding where it's got to go. So,
Thank you both. We're going to go into our closing remarks for 2 minutes, and we will begin with Mr. Trott.
thank you. So again, I want to thank CCTV and League of Women Voters for hosting us, and for all of you who are tuning in to watch us. I appreciate the questions that were asked today. They cover some of the most important issues in the state of Oregon, and they have been raised in various forums and by various individuals that I've had contact with throughout this campaign. I do want to make a point, though. One of my third priorities on here, and it's probably one of my strongest priorities, is about video lottery. I've worked at the lottery for almost 20 years, and I know the kind of damage that it sustains. And we're talking here about ballot measure 97, and everybody's wringing their hands over what it's going to do to a corporation and what it's going to do to prices going up and how unfair it might be. I'm going to tell you that video lottery accounts for about 90% of the revenue for the state of Oregon from the Oregon Lottery. And about a third of that is paid by problem addicted gamblers. And there's only about 2 to 3% of those players. It's one of the most regressive taxes, most damaging taxes you'll ever see. And the cost of all of that spreads down to all of us. People going off the job rolls and having to go on to government welfare. People committing crimes to pay and going into prisons, and court costs and police costs going off. And all that stuff gets shoved down to the counties. The state's taking their money in for parks and those kind of things, and you're just not seeing the cost laid out to you. So I would have you bear that in mind when you're considering support of that ballot measure. The kind of revenue, it'll generate 3 times the kind of revenue that lottery can bring in with a lot less damage to the people of Oregon. I believe that Oregon is one of the most beautiful, magnificent states out there, and I believe that it needs a state legislature that is worthy of it. And I would like to be in that state legislature representing the people of House District 19 and the people of Oregon, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hack, your
Thank
closing
you.
remarks.
Thank you. Again, I too would like to say thank you to CCTV and the League of Women Voters, and to my constituents. I have enjoyed my time in the legislature, and I look forward to many more years. It was one of the most rewarding and humbling experiences that I have ever had. And I just want you to know that I want you to continue to reach out to me. I can honestly tell you that your voice counts. I personally may have taken some different votes over the last couple of sessions, but because I heard from you, I voted with you, and I continue to do that. I will continue to do that. Education will always be a priority to me. Agriculture and our sustainables will continue to be a priority to me as we generate new revenues for our state. Small business and our employers will always be a top priority. Again, we talked about transportation. I believe that my experience in the legislature and serving on the committees that I've had the opportunity to serve on I've learned so much, and I look forward to more to come. I look forward to some real positive legislation and the opportunity to serve all of you in the future, and I hope that I have your vote come November 8th. Again, I'm Jody Hack, running for House District 19. Thank you.
This is all the time we have. You've been watching Your Vote Counts, a candidate forum for Legislative House District 19 with Jody Hack and Larry Trott. We hope you will watch our other candidate forums, and please see the CCTV website for time and dates. These forums are a public service to voters to become more acquainted with candidates who hope to lead our city, county, and state governments in the coming years. Ballots will be mailed on October 20th and should be returned by November 8th at 8 p.m. We urge you to make democracy work and be a voter. This is Vernadine Anderson for the League of Women Voters and CCTV, thanking you for watching. Your vote counts.